The crystal chandelier of the gilded palm trembled slightly from the blizzard winds outside, but the real chill in the room came from table 4. It was 5 o'clock in Chicago, and the heavy velvet curtains had been drawn against the December darkness, creating a sanctuary of warmth and the scent of fresh pine needles. For most patrons, this historic tea lounge was a place of quiet reflection, a refuge where the clinking of porcelain was the loudest sound. But for Maya Robinson, tonight felt less like a holiday service and more like a tightrope walk over a canyon. She adjusted the collar of her burgundy uniform, her fingers grazing the small, cool metal of a globe pendant hidden beneath the fabric, a silent reminder of a world she used to navigate with ease, far bigger than these 4 walls. At table 4, the disruption was palpable. Grant Sterling sat like a king on a throne too small for his ego, his Italian suit straining at the shoulders as he gestured wildly. He was a man who wore his wealth like armor, loud and flashy, a stark contrast to the understated elegance of the room. Across from him sat Mr. Zhang, an elderly gentleman with eyes as sharp and quiet as a hawk's, observing the scene with a stillness that bordered on discomfort. Hovering nervously near Sterling's elbow was Sarah, the newest waitress on staff. At 22, she was still learning the delicate dance of high-end service, and her hands were visibly shaking as she tried to refill Sterling's water glass. The accident happened in a split second. A sudden, impatient gesture from Sterling caused Sarah to flinch, and the silver spoon on her tray clipped the edge of a saucer. The sharp clink rang out like a gunshot in the hushed room. "For God's sake!" Sterling bellowed, causing heads at nearby tables to turn. He wiped a non-existent drop of water from his sleeve, his face reddening with disproportionate rage. "Do they hire clumsy toddlers now? Get out of my face before you ruin my suit." Sarah froze, her face draining of color as tears welled up in her eyes. She looked ready to bolt, or worse, to collapse right there on the plush carpet. Before the manager could even notice the commotion, Maya was moving. She didn't run. She glided, covering the distance with the practiced grace of someone who had walked into far more hostile rooms than this. She stepped smoothly between Sterling and the terrified girl, effectively shielding Sarah from his glare. "Sarah, check on the scones in the kitchen, please," Maya said softly, her voice calm and steady. It wasn't a request. It was a lifeline. Sarah nodded frantically and scurried away, disappearing behind the service doors. Maya turned to face table 4, her expression composing itself into a mask of polite, impenetrable professionalism. She met Sterling's angry gaze without blinking, her posture upright and dignified. "I apologize for the disturbance, gentlemen," she said, her tone level. "I will be taking over your service personally this evening to ensure everything meets your standards." Sterling sneered, leaning back in his chair and looking her up and down with open disdain. He didn't see a woman in her 30s trying to earn an honest living. He saw a target. "Great," he muttered, loud enough for Mr. Zhang to hear. "Another one. Just try not to mess up the order, sweetheart. I don't have time for incompetence." Maya didn't flinch at the insult, but as she picked up the menu, she realized this wasn't just a rude customer. It was a test of every ounce of patience she had left. Maya is holding back a storm, but for how long? If you are still watching and finding value in this story so far, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you're here with us. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black Brilliance and turn on the bell so you don't miss the moment justice is served. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's continue and see just how incompetent Maya really is. "Patience is a luxury I cannot afford," Sterling announced, tossing the leather-bound menu onto the table like a gauntlet. He looked at Mr. Zhang with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, eager to reclaim control of the interaction. "We need the best, Zhang. No more games." He turned his attention back to Maya, tapping a thick finger aggressively on the parchment page listing the rare teas. "Bring us a pot of the da hung pao and the pu'er cakes." The pronunciation was brutal, mangling the delicate vowels of the ancient teas into something unrecognizable, stripping them of their history and reducing them to clumsy sounds. Maya stood perfectly still, her pen poised over her pad. She knew exactly what he wanted: the da hong pao, the legendary big red robe oolong, and the vintage pu'er. To let the order go to the kitchen with such disregard would be a disservice not just to the establishment, but to the culture Mr. Zhang represented. "Excellent choice, sir," she said, her voice soft but carrying a distinct, undeniable clarity. "However, just to clarify for the tea master, you're requesting the vintage pu'er aged 20 years, and the Dahong Pao from the Wui Mountains? The oxidation process for the latter requires a specific water temperature to unlock its true character." The correction was gentle, professional, and entirely necessary, but to Grant Sterling, it felt like a slap in the face. The tips of his ears turned a violent shade of red. He glanced quickly at Mr. Zhang, who had raised an eyebrow, seemingly impressed by the waitress's specific knowledge of the region. That small sign of approval for the help was the spark that lit Sterling's fuse. He wasn't about to be upstaged in front of a key investor by a woman in a polyester uniform who he believed was merely memorizing lines from a training manual. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, rubber-banded stack of bills, mostly hundreds. He slammed it onto the pristine white damask tablecloth with a heavy thud, the sound jarring against the soft holiday jazz playing in the background. The vulgar display of cash looked grotesque sitting next to the delicate bone china and silver teaspoons. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Sterling hissed, leaning forward, his voice dripping with venom. "You think correcting my pronunciation makes you special? It makes you a menu reader. Nothing more." He untied the rubber band, letting the bills fan out slightly. "There's $5,000 cash here. And if you think you're so cultured..." He reached into his inner pocket again, pulling out a leather checkbook and uncapping a gold fountain pen with a sharp click. "I'll write a certified check for another $95,000 right now. That's $100,000. A lifetime of tips for someone like you." He scribbled furiously, the scratch of the nib loud in the sudden quiet of the immediate area, then ripped the check out and slapped it on top of the cash. "It's yours. All of it. If you can serve us in fluent, technical Mandarin. Prove you understand the history, the culture, the soul of what you're serving. Prove you're not just a parrot repeating words you don't understand." The lounge went dead silent as Sterling leaned in, his eyes gleaming with malice. "But if you fail, you apologize to me and my guests on your knees for wasting our time." On her knees. The threat hung in the air, archaic and brutal, stripping away the modern veneer of the hotel and exposing the raw, ugly power dynamic beneath. The surrounding tables had fallen completely silent. Elderly couples paused with their teacups halfway to their lips, witnessing a scene that felt uncomfortably like a public execution. The stack of bills on the table seemed to pulse under the chandelier light, a tangible representation of everything Grant Sterling believed gave him the right to belittle another human being. Maya looked at the money, but she didn't see luxury or greed. In her mind's eye, the green paper dissolved into a stark white invoice she had received that morning. Sunrise Memory Care Facility, past due, $8,200. She saw her father's confused face when the nurses told him he might have to move to a state-funded ward, away from the garden window that was the only thing keeping him tethered to the present. Sterling thought he was buying her humiliation, but he had unknowingly offered the one thing she desperately needed to buy her father's dignity. Mr. Zhang, who had been watching the exchange with deepening furrows in his brow, finally leaned forward. His voice was low, laced with the authority of old money. "Mr. Sterling, this is unnecessary. We are here for business, not a spectacle. Please put your money away." "No, Jean, look at her." Sterling cut him off, his laugh harsh and barking. He gestured at Maya as if she were a prop. "It's a lesson in humility. These people need to learn that you can't just fake your way through quality. Let her back down, apologize, and we can all move on." Maya took a slow, steady breath. The scent of the Dahong Pao tea leaves wafted up from the open canister, a woody, roasted aroma that acted like a key unlocking a buried room in her memory. For a heartbeat, the hotel lounge faded. She wasn't standing on a plush carpet in Chicago. She was standing on the podium of the General Assembly Hall in New York, wearing a tailored blazer, translating complex trade agreements for delegates who hung on her every precise syllable. She remembered the weight of responsibility, the power of words to build bridges or burn them. She blinked, and the lounge returned, but Maya Robinson, the waitress, was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. She straightened her spine, her chin lifting just enough to look Sterling dead in the eye. The fatigue vanished from her face, replaced by a cool, terrifying calm. "I accept," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the room. "And yes, Mr. Sterling, I expect that check to be certified." Sterling blinked, his smirk faltering for a microsecond before returning twice as wide. He capped his pen with a flourish. "Deal. Entertain us, honey." Maya turned slowly toward Mr. Zhang. She didn't just turn. She pivoted with a fluid, disciplined grace that belonged in a royal court, not a tea lounge. She clasped her hands in front of her and bowed, not the subservient nod of a servant, but a perfect, 45-degree inclination of respect between equals. When she straightened and opened her mouth, the English language disappeared entirely. "The bet is locked, and the silence in the room is deafening. If you are still watching and find value in this moment of courage, please comment the number 3 below to let me know you are here with us. And if you haven't joined our community yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black Brilliance and turn on the bell so you don't miss a single story of triumph. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you every day. Now, let's continue and listen to the truth." The harsh sounds of English vanished, replaced by the melodic, precise tones of Beijing dialect that flowed from Maya like a song. The transformation was instantaneous and total. Her hands, previously used for clearing plates, now moved with the fluid, ritualistic grace of a gongfu tea master. She lifted the ceramic teapot, the steam curling around her fingers like incense smoke, and poured the amber liquid into the delicate-tasting cups in a continuous, unbroken stream. "Honored guests," she began, her Mandarin resonating with a posh, scholarly accent that was rarely heard outside of diplomatic circles in Beijing. "Please allow me to present the Dahong Pao, the big red rope. Grown in the mineral-rich soil of the Wui Mountains, this particular harvest is celebrated for its yen yun, or rock rime, a mineral finish that lingers on the palate long after the tea is gone." Mr. Zhang's eyes went wide behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He sat up straighter, his mouth slightly open, as if he were seeing a ghost. Maya didn't stop. She placed the cup before him with exact precision. The oxidation process was halted at precisely 60% to preserve the floral orchid notes, a technique perfected during the Qing dynasty to honor the imperial court. Sterling blinked, his mouth working silently like a fish out of water. He looked from Maya to Zhang, desperate for a sign that this was a joke. But before he could speak, a sommelier walked past their table. Without breaking her rhythm, Maya turned her head slightly and switched codes effortlessly. "Jean-Luc, s'il vous plaît, baissez légèrement le thermostat," she said in flawless, rapid-fire French. "L'humidité est trop élevée pour le bouquet de cidre. Jean-Luc, please lower the thermostat slightly. The humidity is too high for the bouquet of this tea." The sommelier nodded respectfully. "Tout de suite, madame." As she turned back, she caught the eye of a man walking through the lobby, a delegate she recognized from her days at the UN. She offered a subtle, respectful nod. "Assalamu alaikum, Your Excellency," she murmured in perfect Arabic. "I hope the summit went well." The lounge was spellbound. The snow outside had stopped, leaving the city lights to glitter through the window. But no one was looking at the view. They were looking at the waitress who had turned table 4 into her own private stage. Sterling's face had gone from red to a pale, clammy white. The sweat on his forehead was visible now. He realized with dawning horror that he wasn't just losing a bet, he was losing control of his entire reality. Panic clawed at his throat. He stood up abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. "Stop it," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Stop making those noises. It's gibberish. It's a trick." She memorized a script from some kung fu movie. Slam. Mr. Zhang's hand hit the table. It wasn't a violent strike, but the authority behind it silenced Sterling instantly. The elderly businessman stood up, trembling slightly, not with age, but with indignation. "Gibberish," Mr. Zhang repeated, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. He looked at Sterling with a gaze that could have frozen magma. "Mr. Sterling, this young woman speaks a dialect more refined than my own grandfather. She is not just serving tea, she is reciting poetry. She understands the soul of my culture better than you understand your own business." Sterling froze, looking for an escape, but the walls of the lounge seemed to be closing in on him. He looked at Maya, hoping to see fear, but found only a mirror reflecting his own inadequacy. Maya smiled. It was a serene, terrifyingly calm smile. "I am fluent in 6 other languages, Mr. Sterling," she said softly, switching back to English but retaining the regal cadence of her performance. "Would you prefer I explain the bill in Russian, or is the point sufficiently made?" "Who are you?" Sterling whispered, sinking back into his chair, his arrogance deflating like a punctured tire. The question hung in the silence, stripping away the last remnants of the power dynamic he had tried so hard to enforce. He looked at Maya not as a servant, but as a puzzle he couldn't solve, a clumsy toddler who had suddenly grown into a giant. Maya set the silver tray down on the side table with a deliberate, final click. She unclasped her hands, dropping the deferential posture of a waitress and standing with the natural authority of a woman who had once silenced a room of world leaders with a raised palm. "I am Dr. Maya Robinson," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "For 5 years, I served as a senior interpreter at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. I hold a PhD in Applied Linguistics and International Relations from Georgetown University." A gasp rippled through the nearby tables. Sterling looked like he had been punched in the gut. "A doctor?" he stammered. "Then why are you here?" "Serving tea." Maya's expression softened, but not for him. She touched the globe pendant at her throat, her eyes glistening with a sudden sheen of tears that made her look not weak, but infinitely strong. "Because 6 months ago, my father was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. He forgot how to tie his shoes. Then he forgot how to drive. Last week, he forgot my name." She took a step closer to the table, her voice trembling slightly with raw emotion. "His specialized memory care costs $8,000 a month. Insurance won't cover it. So I left the UN, I left my career, and I came home to Chicago to hold his hand while he still remembers who I am. I work double shifts here because there is no shame in honest labor, Mr. Sterling. There is only shame in people who think their bank account gives them the right to treat others like dirt." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of a daughter's love and a community's judgment. Sterling looked down at his hands, unable to meet her gaze. Mr. Zhang stood up slowly. He looked at Sterling with ice-cold disappointment, the kind that ends careers. "You called her incompetent," Zhang said quietly. "You mocked her. Yet she has more dignity in her little finger than you have in your entire portfolio." He pointed a shaking finger at the checkbook still lying on the table. "A man who cannot respect human dignity cannot be my partner. I do not do business with bullies." Sterling looked up, panic flaring in his eyes. "Mr. Zhang, wait please." "Pay her," Zhang commanded, his voice hard as steel. "Honor your bet. Now." Under the pressure of the entire room staring at him, judging him, Sterling picked up his gold pen. His hand shook violently as he filled out the remaining fields of the check. He was paying for his prejudice, literally and figuratively. He ripped the check from the book, the sound sharp and final, and shoved it across the table toward Maya. "There," he choked out, his face gray. "Take it." Maya took the check. She didn't gloat. She simply folded it with care and placed it in her apron pocket next to her father's photo. Sterling stood up to leave, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere, but Mr. Zhang delivered the final blow. "Keep the receipt, Grant," the old man said, turning his back on the millionaire. "It is the last transaction we will ever have. Consider it the price of your reputation." The heavy oak doors of the Gilded Palm closed behind Grant Sterling with a dull thud, leaving him alone in the biting Chicago wind, while inside, the warmth seemed to have finally returned to the room. The silence that had gripped the lounge during the confrontation shattered, replaced not by the polite murmur of high tea, but by a sudden, spontaneous ripple of applause. It started from the elderly couple at the corner table and swelled until the entire room was clapping, softly, respectfully, acknowledging that they had just witnessed something far more valuable than a tea service. Sarah, the young waitress who had been trembling only minutes before, ran forward. Forgetting protocol, she threw her arms around Maya. "You were amazing," she whispered, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "Thank you. Nobody has ever stood up for me like that." Maya hugged her back, feeling the tension finally drain from her own shoulders. For the first time all night, the invisible linguist allowed herself to be seen. She wasn't just a uniform anymore. She was the protector of this small, fragile ecosystem. Mr. Zhang remained by the table, waiting until Sarah stepped away. He reached into his suit pocket and produced a heavy, cream-colored business card embossed with gold lettering. He held it out to Maya with both hands, a gesture of supreme respect in his culture. "My firm is establishing a new North American headquarters right here in Chicago," he said, his voice warm and grandfatherly. "We are in desperate need of a director of cultural relations. Someone who understands that language is about connection, not just vocabulary." He paused, glancing at the photo of Maya's father peeking out of her apron pocket. "The position comes with full family health benefits and flexible hours. We believe family comes first. I would be honored if you would consider it." Maya took the card, her fingers brushing against the embossed letters. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline. It was the promise that she wouldn't have to choose between her career and her father's care ever again. I don't know what to say, Mr. Zhang," she stammered, her diplomat's composure cracking into a genuine, radiant smile. "Say yes," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "But first, go make that phone call." Maya nodded, clutching the check for $100,000 in one hand and the business card in the other. She walked to the quiet corner of the lobby and dialed the number she knew by heart. "Sunrise Care? This is Maya Robinson," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm coming to see my dad. And please, tell him we're moving him to the private room tomorrow. The one with the garden view. He's going to see the birds again." 10 minutes later, Maya stepped out of the hotel. The blizzard had passed, leaving the city covered in a pristine, glittering blanket of white. The air was cold, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel the chill. She reached up and touched the globe pendant at her neck, feeling the world expand around her once more. She realized then that while she spoke 9 languages, kindness was the only one that never needed translation. True elegance is never found in the price of a suit, but in the quiet strength of one's character, as Maya proved. Dignity is a currency that never devaluates. When we choose to see people with our hearts instead of our prejudices, we unlock a world far more beautiful than any exclusive lounge. If you believe that brilliance comes in every shade, please share this story to spread the warmth, and join the Black Brilliance family for more daily tales of triumph and truth.